You ever try to plan a surprise birthday party in the middle of the wilderness for the one person who knows you better than you know yourself? Yeah, don't. Now, I ain't saying I regret it. Not entirely. But let me tell you, if you're ever tempted to pull off a sneaky celebration out in the sticks, just know you're playing chess with nature, bugs, smoke, and cake frosting. All while your wife's watching your every move like a hawk. A kind, loving hawk, but a hawk nonetheless. This whole story starts the night before the trip. We'd planned this getaway for weeks, a peaceful camping weekend to unwind, unplug, and get Liesl away from work stress. What she didn't know was that I had a little birthday ambush planned out. We weren't the kind of couple who made big fusses over birthdays. But this year, I wanted to do something different. Special. Unexpected. We were leaving early the next morning, so the evening before was spent in a familiar dance. The two of us packing up the car like we were about to hike across the country. Liesl's a system person. Neatly labeled containers, every item in its exact spot, and no less than 3 checklists. One in her head, one on paper, and one she claims is just instinct. Watching her pack is like watching a magician. She fits a weekend's worth of gear into a hatchback like it's a tent version of Tetris. Meanwhile, I was busy pretending to check the tire pressure and make myself look useful. My job, apparently, was load supervisor, which mostly meant carrying heavy stuff and nodding. "Did you pack the tea strainer?" she asked, standing on her toes to zip the top of a cooler bag. "Yep, bottom pocket of the red bag." I said confidently. She gave me a long look. "That's the wrong pocket, isn't it? It's in a pocket. That counts." She smirked and went back to her list. Truth was, my head wasn't in the game. Not fully. I kept glancing toward the kitchen, where a certain white bakery box sat waiting on the counter. That box held a small lemon vanilla cake I picked up earlier that day. I'd told the lady behind the counter it was for my wife's birthday, and she'd even piped a tiny happy birthday Liesl in gold frosting on top. It looked amazing and delicate and very, very Mel-table. Then there was the banner, a big, bold, glittery happy birthday strung across little triangles. Classic, only I didn't realize until too late that I'd forgotten to buy string. So I tore through the house until I found something. This bundle of lavender-scented ribbon Liesl uses for sachets in the linen cupboard smelled like a spa, or like what a mosquito might call perfume. I hid it all under my side of the bed and waited patiently, sort of. Around 10, Liesl brushed her teeth, checked the weather on her phone, kissed me goodnight, and slipped under the blankets. "You're not coming to bed?" she asked as I hovered by the door. "Just checking the locks," I mumbled, and making sure the battery bank's charged. She gave me that squint, the one that says, "I know you're up to something, but I'll let it slide." Then she turned off her reading light and rolled over. I waited a full 5 minutes, counting in my head like a spy. Then I grabbed the cake box, the banner, and the sachet string and crept toward the front door like I was breaking out of my own house. The floorboards creaked. The dog, Daisy, lifted her head from the hallway and gave me a lazy look. I held up a finger. "Not now, girl. This is for the greater good." The night air was cool, crisp, the way late August likes to be when it's teasing fall. I opened the car's back hatch, set the box down gently like it was made of eggshells, then tucked the rest of the decorations under a folded tarp. It wasn't perfect, but it would do. The string smelled stronger out in the open. That should have been my first warning. When I finally slipped back into bed, Liesl stirred and mumbled, "Did you plug in the battery bank?" "Twice," I whispered. She nodded sleepily. I stared at the ceiling, smiling. This was going to be good. We left just after sunrise. The sky was doing that cotton candy thing it does in late summer. Streaks of soft pinks and oranges stretching behind the silhouette of the trees. It smelled like dew and engine oil and strong coffee, which Liesl handed me in a travel mug the second I stepped outside. "Drink," she said. "You're a better man when caffeinated." Misty fields and slow-moving cows. The morning fog still hugged the hills. My truck rumbled comfortably beneath us as we got onto the highway. We didn't talk much at first, just music playing low, and the occasional, "Did you remember the propane? Or you brought the bug spray, right?" At some point, Liesl reached into the glove box and pulled out a printed map. "Oh no," I said. "We've gone analog." She raised an eyebrow. "GPS lies. Only when I'm the one using it." She traced a finger along the route. "If we take the back road after Doringfontein, we'll get to the ridge camp faster. Plus, better views. Which means more potholes. Don't be soft." I grinned and kept driving. About halfway through the trip, I started getting anxious about the cake. Was it getting too warm in the back? Should I have packed it in the cooler? What if it slid around and smudged the icing? Every bump made me flinch. Liesl noticed. "Of course. You all right?" she asked. "Yeah, just thinking about. Tire pressure?" She didn't answer, but I caught the smirk out the corner of her mouth. Around midday, we rolled down a dirt road that snaked between tall pine trees. The forest thickened, sunlight flickering through the canopy like strobe lights from a lazy disco. The car bumped along, crunching over gravel and twigs. Birds chirped in sharp little bursts. Somewhere off to the left, I heard a stream gurgling behind the trees. It was quiet, peaceful, exactly the kind of place we always pictured when we said, "Let's go camping." The site came into view, a flat clearing ringed by trees, with a fire pit already set in the center and 2 rough benches carved from logs. Perfect. We parked, stretched, and got to work. Liesl wasted no time. She had the tent out in minutes, laid flat and flapping gently as we secured the corners. I hammered in pegs. She clipped poles. The 2 of us had done this dance enough times that we barely needed to speak. Except for when I nearly smacked her in the knee with a mallet. "Henry, sorry. "I thought your leg was the ground," she glared. "Do I look like soil to you?" "Only the rich, fertile kind." That earned me a shove and a grin. We stood back to admire the tent once. It was up, solid, taut, ready for anything. I wiped my forehead with my sleeve. "Tea time?" she asked. "Always." She pulled out her kit like a ritual. Tin pot, strainer, the weird blend of Ruibos and mint she loved. The fire crackled to life under her practiced hand. She sat on a camping chair, legs crossed, kettle balanced, humming softly, that same little tune she always did when steeping tea. I sat beside her and sipped the wind. The forest smelled like pine needles and hot dirt. The firewood popped and hissed, little embers floating up into the bright canopy overhead. I smiled. Tomorrow was her birthday, and I had a plan. The sun was just starting to shift toward the west, casting long, lazy shadows between the trees. The campsite had settled into that golden afternoon calm, the kind where the birds quiet down a little, the fire crackles steady, and the air smells like warm pine bark and smoke. It was the kind of peace I'd been craving for weeks. Liesl was sitting in her fold-out chair, one leg tucked under the other, kettle in one hand, book in the other. Her hoodie was zipped up halfway, and she had that relaxed look, the one that said, "This is exactly where I want to be." Meanwhile, I was pacing around camp like a man with ants in his boots. I kept pretending to check things. I looked at the tent pegs like they might wiggle loose on their own. I fluffed the sleeping bags like we were hosting royalty. I even wandered over to the woodpile and restacked it twice, for no reason other than it gave me something to do. Truth was, my brain wasn't in the moment. It was 15 minutes into the future, picturing the look on Liesl's face when she saw the banner, the cake, the surprise. But here's the thing about camping with someone who knows you, really knows you. They notice things. "You're acting twitchy," she said, not looking up from her book. "Twitchy," I said, grabbing a stick and poking the fire. "I'm not twitchy, I'm active." "Huh," she sipped her tea. "That's all. No follow-up, no grilling, just hung, the most terrifying response a wife can give a man." She went back to her reading. I went back to pacing. I knew the moment had to be just right. I couldn't set up the surprise while she was sitting right there. She'd catch me before I even got the first bit of ribbon tied. I needed a window, a gap, a distraction. But Liesl was a statue. She was settled. The kind of settled that says, "I'm not moving for an hour unless a bear wanders through camp or the firewood turns into gold." Then, as if the universe decided to give me a fighting chance, she suddenly closed her book and sat forward. "Shoot! I left my phone charger in the car." My heart leaped. "Want me to get it?" I asked, maybe a little too fast. She gave me a sideways glance. "You sure? Don't mind." "Oh, I insist," I said, already halfway to standing. She waved me off. "I'll grab it. I need to stretch anyway." She stood up, dusted off her jeans, and headed toward the car, taking the footpath that snaked around the trees and down to the dirt lot. The moment she disappeared from sight, I sprang into action like I was trying out for the camping Olympics. I ran to the back of the truck, lifted the tarp, and there it was, the box, the banner, the sachet string, and the small, wrapped gift I'd tucked in at the last second. "All right, Bandit," I whispered to myself. "Let's do this. First mission, hang the banner." I found 2 decent trees spaced apart with a nice open stretch between them, perfect for visibility. I pulled out the banner, shook it loose, and grabbed the string. Right away, that lavender lemon scent hit me, stronger than I remembered. Sharp, sweet, aggressively herbal. I almost sneezed, but time was short. I wrapped one end of the scented string around the first tree, tied it tight, then stretched the banner across to the second tree. As I tied the other end, I noticed a little insect buzz past my ear, then another. 3. It was like a switch had been flipped. I glanced around. There was a swarm. A cloud, tiny black dots dancing in the air like evil little confetti. The scent must have hit them like a dinner bell. Nope, 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 nope. I started waving them away with one hand while still trying to secure the banner with the other. I tied it quick, then sprinted back to the table where I'd left the cake box. But I tripped, because of course I tripped. My foot caught on a root, one that hadn't been there 5 minutes ago, I swear, and I stumbled forward. The cake box flew from my hands, hit the table edge, and landed with a soft plop frosting down on the ground. "Oh, come on!" I dropped to my knees, lifted the box. Half the cake was still in there, thank the Lord, but the rest had smooshed against the inside of the lid. Frosting clung to my hands. I looked like I'd punched a lemon meringue in a bar fight. Still, not all was lost. I placed what was left of the cake on the table, tried to pat it back into some kind of shape, and reached for a napkin. But as I turned, I bumped the tea mug. Liesl's tea mug, still half full. It wobbled, then tipped. The contents sloshed out in slow motion, a trail of hot brown liquid arcing through the air before landing right in the fire pit. SSSSSSH HHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHH. The fire hissed like a snake. Smoke billowed up in a thick cloud, a plume of white and gray rising into the trees. I froze. Then I heard something that made my heart drop into my hiking boots. Footsteps, fast ones, crunching gravel, leaves rustling. "Henry," came Liesl's voice, sharp and rising in pitch. "What happened? Is something on fire?" I panicked. In my rush to fix everything, I yanked on the birthday banner to straighten it, and the whole thing came loose. The scented string unraveled, from one tree whipped through the air, and tangled itself around my head like some kind of pastel, perfumed boa constrictor. Now I'm standing there, banner wrapped around my forehead, one hand covered in frosting, the other swatting at bugs, with smoke pouring out of the fire like I just tried to summon a demon. And that's exactly when Liesl rounded the corner. She stopped. She blinked. She looked from me, to the fire, to the half-melted cake on the table, then back to me. I didn't move. I couldn't. I was like a wild animal, caught mid-crime, frozen in place, hoping if I stood still enough, she wouldn't see me. "What?" she said slowly. "The hell are you doing?" I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again, then quietly said, "Surprise." Liesl stared at me like she was trying to decide if I'd lost my mind, or if I'd always been this way, and she was just now noticing. I stood perfectly still, birthday banner half wrapped around my head, like some kind of forest-themed Miss Universe contestant. One side of the banner flapped in the breeze, the other hung over my left ear. My hands were caked in frosting. A family of sugar-hungry flies was already circling the half-destroyed cake. Smoke still drifted lazily from the fire pit, like the forest itself was judging me. "Surprise," I said again, in case the first one hadn't landed. Liesl blinked, her lips twitched, and then she burst out laughing. Not just a polite chuckle, not a little awe, you tried giggle. No, this was full-on, head thrown back. I squinted. Belly-deep laughter that echoed through the trees. It caught me completely off guard. I'd been bracing for a groan, a lecture, or, at best, a long sigh and a pity hug. But she laughed, and once she started, I couldn't help it either. I let out a breath I'd been holding for 20 minutes and laughed with her. Still half blinded by the glittery ribbon hanging across my face, she walked over, gently peeled the banner off my head, and looked down at the cake. One side was intact. The other looked like someone had tried to bury treasure in it with their fists. "Oh, Hen," she said, wiping a smudge of frosting from my cheek. "You really went for it, didn't you? I was going to hang the banner, set the cake, maybe bring out the tea again, you know?" "Romance," she snorted. "You set the fire on actual fire. That was unintentional." She bent to look at the kettle, now blackened at the bottom where the spilled tea had steamed off. "Well, at least you didn't burn the forest down yet." She picked up the cake box, examined it like an archaeologist assessing an artifact, and said, "I can salvage this." And she did. She pulled a small knife from her pack and carefully cut away the smushed parts. Somehow, she even managed to scoop some frosting back into place, with the back of a spoon, the bugs. She lit a citronella candle and muttered something about your fancy ribbon being bug crack. We sat down at the table with what remained of the cake, slightly off-center, slightly soggy, but still sweet. "You know," she said between bites, "you could have just waited till tomorrow morning and missed the dramatic effect." "You are the dramatic effect." I grinned and raised my fork in a little toast. "Happy birthday, babe." She clinked her fork against mine. To Kleinofs and Klink, after the cleanup, things settled. We refilled the kettle and got the fire going again, properly this time. Liesl made a fresh pot of tea, and we sipped it as the sun dipped behind the trees and the sky shifted from golden to dusky purple, the scent of pine and smoke mixed with a faint sweetness, still clinging to my shirt. Somewhere nearby, a nightjar started calling, low and rhythmic. The stars blinked to life, one by one. We didn't talk much, just sat close, her hand resting on mine, the two of us wrapped in the kind of silence that doesn't need filling. Later, we climbed into the tent, tired and warm, and Liesl curled up beside me, resting her head on my chest. "You know," she mumbled, already half asleep, "this is probably the most ridiculous birthday I've ever had. I'll take that as a compliment," she smiled. "It is." The rest of the weekend went off without a hitch. We hiked along the ridge trail, took photos of wildflowers, spotted a couple of dassies sunning themselves on the rocks. Liesl read by the fire while I tried, and failed, to catch fish in the stream. Nearby, she told me I looked heroic with a rod in hand, even though I never got a single bite at night. We roasted marshmallows and told stories. I tried to make up for the birthday surprise by making camp pancakes the next morning. They were mostly edible. There was no phone signal, no emails, no deadlines. Just the two of us, the trees, and a shared memory that we'd laugh about for years to come. Now, sitting here by this fire, years later, the stars above, the flames dancing, low and a breeze stirring the smoke just enough to sting my eyes. I still think about that weekend, not because it was perfect, but because it wasn't. That's what made it ours. And every year, when her birthday comes around, Liesl still leans in and says, "Remember the time you turned into a human birthday?" Banner, and I say, I was ahead of my time. And she says, "You were covered in frosting." And I say, "Still sweeter than the cake."